Hi, it's Sheeva from Fancy Comma, and I'm back with another video in which I talk about, well, today I'm talking about political, hold on, let me find my friend on LinkedIn, she posted something that I thought was really interesting. My friend from graduate school, she posted this quote. She said, she was talking about a thing that she attended as a young person. She attended an event that was like run by Al Gore. I don't know if anyone remembers Al Gore, the the politician that was Bill Clinton's running mate and that Bill Clinton's vice president, and then he ran for president with Joe Lieberman, who recently died, RIP. But anyway, Al Gore, he lost remember when he lost the 2003 presidential election, and it was basically decided by the Supreme Court. And then he ended up winning the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in environment and advocacy. I remember he also, for some reason, he said he invented the internet, or this quote about the invention of the internet was like attributed to him. But anyway, um, he had this quote. She wrote in her post, Al Gore reminded us that political will is a renewable resource, and that we can take the most significant first step as U.S. citizens by electing the right officials and advocating for swift climate-focused policy change. And I thought the idea that political will is a renewable resource is really interesting because a lot of people are focused on the climate debate, and that's something I don't talk about a lot here on the Fancy Comma YouTube, just because, for many reasons. One is that I'm not involved in that space, and so I don't know too much about it. The other is there's a lot of different factors involved in that discussion, and a lot of times I see that people talking about climate, they kind of just, there's a lot of communities here in the US that rely on non-renewable energy, for example, coal in West Virginia, petroleum here in Oklahoma and some other states. And I think that it's kind of an incomplete discussion if we don't include everyone, even, you know, the fossil fuel industry in this discussion. But I really, but, and there's more to that. Like that could be a whole other YouTube, but I'm not the right person for that discussion. I think that discussion, it should, there's a lot of science communicators out there focused on climate, and it is important to protect our environment, and we need to come up with a workable way to make sure that our environment is good. Because I remember I worked on a project about ocean health, and I learned that if our oceans aren't clean, for example, not only do we have pollution, which affects people's health, but it also affects business, because many people, their whole livelihood is like fisheries and stuff. They all work in the ocean to catch fish and stuff like that. So that actually, it's like multifaceted. It's really interesting to think about the ways that our environment contributes to our success as a society. Like just the entrepreneurial aspect of working, having the ocean be your like workplace, or like the environmental aspect, the health aspect about ocean health and stuff like that. So I find that really interesting. And I love the idea of political will as a renewable resource. And I think we need to really think about that, especially in the upcoming elections. We have a lot at stake with regards to science issues. And I'm not here to tell you to vote for one candidate or over another in that race, but I think it's really interesting how much of the things that are affecting us do involve science. And I'm not going to list out all of the different issues that involve science, because I feel like I do that a lot on this channel, but I challenge you as a science person with a science background, or any just everyday, I challenge you to try to find the aspects of this race, the presidential race, that are related to science policy, and exercise your renewable resource. Like a renewable resource is basically infinite because it always renews itself. And political will, the ability to organize, as is guaranteed to us. Our freedom of speech is guaranteed to us by the Constitution. So I think it would be terrible if we did not leverage this. And in fact, our participation in our government is basically like the foundation of our country as people living in the US. I can tell you a little bit about how I'm doing that. So I don't know if I've talked about this before on our YouTube, but like last in 2022, I phone banked for Senator Mark Kelly in both English and Spanish. And so my boss from that basically like called me the other day and she was like, "Hey, I got promoted. Do you want to work for me?" And so I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to work for you." So I'm going to be doing Spanish language phone banking for the Arizona Democratic Party and also for um, the Biden campaign in the upcoming election. But I'm going to be I'm going to be a phone banking organizer, leader, and I'm going to be leading people Spanish language, Hispanohablantes, in Arizona. One thing that I find really weird about this election that I found very weird back in 2018, 2017 is the extent to which the Democratic Party is like polarized. Like, I'm a Democrat. There's so much going on in the world. There's the whole uncommitted movement. There's Donald Trump that people are really concerned about. I feel like every time I become active in the Democratic Party, it's because everyone's really fractured. And the last time I tried to get involved in the Democratic Party, it was just like I couldn't because it was so divided. And I really wish that we got along more as a nation, but I just don't think it's possible given that it's like basically like normalized in society to complain about any presidential candidate. And but the renewable resource that we have, I guess that's part of it, is we have our freedoms to complain about political candidates, but I think we also have to really get back to like the political will as a renewable resource. I think that's a really interesting concept, and I think scientists don't use that enough. And I think that metaphor is so apt because we're looking for things, because there's so much scarcity right now. There's inflation and everything, but among all of those things, one thing that we have is political will. So I um, I spent the first few months of this year, or basically the entire month of March, phone banking for Nikki Haley, which is really interesting because I'd never worked on a Republican political campaign before, and I learned a lot kind of about volunteering on the other side, and I wish that both parties were a little bit more towards the middle. I had been doing a deep dive into the polarization of our country, of the U.S. for a podcast that may or may not happen, but basically I've learned that political parties, they like to run the most so like this whole thing where people and I'm not a fan of this, is running your most politically polarizing candidates because they're the most like they have the greatest likelihood of winning. So political campaigns, they're more likely to run their like sort of more fringe candidates to elect them. And apparently like that's a working strategy. So that's why the political candidates have been moving more towards the margins, like very left or very right. But the people themselves, they're kind of, many people are somewhere in the middle. And I think that it's a little bit immoral to game the system like that. Like, I've heard of the Democratic Party basically like supporting candidates, propping them up so that other candidates will lose. And I wonder, like, should that even be legal? And I don't know when that started happening. Was that part of a consequence of Citizens United? The Democrats said it was so bad because of like dark money and everything, but Democrats are also using dark money. I really feel like I really don't know how to feel about that. And I just saw this report from the Pew Research Foundation that said that people are becoming uncomfortable and they don't like the increasing power of social media in our political process. So that's another part of the puzzle, that it's like there's all this dark money, there's all this like, and a lot of it goes into social media. And I don't know if you know this, but Facebook has recently limited the amount, and also Instagram, the Meta apps have limited the amount of political content that you'll see because of all this stuff that happened with misinformation, and I can't think of its name right now, Cambridge Analytica, where people basically were able to pull information about Facebook users down to like who their friends are, and use that to like try to win political campaigns. So we like to think of social media and technology as being like inherently good, but it's neither good nor it's not inherently good and it's not inherently bad. It's kind of just amoral. That's going to be a really interesting problem. And I've already run into like, so first of all, for my job, phone banking for the Arizona Democrats, which I did in 2022, and I'm always excited to talk to Arizona Democrats because they are honestly really really cool and really fun. And I love practicing my Spanish, but I'm gonna have to brush up on my Spanish because I haven't spoken. I took Spanish in middle school, and I took Spanish in high school, and I also minored in Spanish in college, but I don't really speak it. If someone's speaking Spanish, I can kind of like understand them, but I I forgot how to use like um, some of the words in Spanish, like you know how you have like a verb and it has like te or le at the end, the direct object, like for example, Dios le bendigo, where it has like le in the middle, where it's like taking it, it's a direct object taking a it's like a, which means God bless you. Those and like there's a lot of examples of that, and I have to get back into my Spanish grammar. Otherwise, I'm going to just like forget Spanish because I don't know how much you know about the brain and language development. But if you don't learn a language within the first 13 years of your life, you won't have a native level of fluency, like, you know, speaking it like you're a native speaker. So I think I kind of have that because I learned about this fact, and then I took a foreign language because I was like, well, I want to learn some languages so I can know some languages. So I can take advantage of this critical period because it's called a critical period. So I'm going to have to deepen my Spanish skills. So I'm a bit frustrated with where the US is going right now politically. I just feel like we have never been more divided in my lifetime. But I decided I'm putting my personal feelings about this over, I'm just ignoring my personal feelings, and I'm going to volunteer because I think that people that speak Spanish should also have involvement in the political process to a greater extent than they have. I was just chatting on Twitter yesterday with someone because I live in Oklahoma and we've had some pretty bad tornadoes recently. But the really interesting thing to me is that whenever we get tornado alerts, they're actually sent in English. They're not sent in Spanish. Like I wonder if there's, and I was telling someone, I wonder to what extent, like, do we even have Spanish language alerts? Because we have our English weather, the National Weather Service. I don't know if they have a Spanish option. We do have like Spanish language local channels, so I've never watched them in a tornado. I don't know if they have the same level of like minute by minute analysis of the weather events. That's really important to keep everyone in the loop. This is the fancy comma YouTube. We talk about politics, we talk about communications, we talk about marketing, we talk about everything. Politics is one of our core functions. We do political communications for people, and trying to get into the world of communications as a scientist, someone with a red state Democrat, as I write about in my upcoming book, Science X Marketing, it's kind of difficult to reconcile my personal views with like the political views of like the entire Democratic Party because I'm a Democrat, but I decided because I want to be involved in this and because I think it's really important that people that speak Spanish are included in this discussion, especially in Arizona, which shares the border with Mexico, and they have a lot of it's important to empower these people that Hispanohablantes, Arizonenses, Hispanohablantes. I don't know how. There's no way that my Spanish can. I have to immerse myself more in Spanish. I still think at the end of this race, what is it like? I have a countdown going on my phone. Hold on, let me see. 190 days, 189 days until election day. So, with 189 days until election day in an election that I am personally not that excited about, I decided to put my interests, my personal opinions over I just decided to get involved because someone gave me the chance to get involved. So we'll see if there's so much at stake. There's the whole controversy of the war happening in the Middle East and what that's doing at college campuses right now, which is really interesting to me. And there's also the question of the economy and the rising price of goods, inflation, um, the question of like foreign policy with regards to like technology issues, like Joe Biden. So the House and the Senate passed a bill basically banning TikTok, or they they banned it. It's not fully banned yet because basically ByteDance, who's the founder of TikTok, has some time to either sell the company to a US based company or they will have to shut down. But then I read that that's going to go to court because they were going to sue the government of the US because they don't want that to happen. So as long as they'll be suing TikTok, or ByteDance will be suing the US, um, I think that TikTok will still be in use. And it's been really interesting to see that people's responses and interesting and opinions about TikTok. I've noticed that a lot of young people are really vehemently opposed to the TikTok ban. I just find it really interesting that these are the issues that we're facing going into the election. And there's two wars. There's the inflation happening. There's the border thing happening, which I'm going to be phone banking in Spanish to maybe people that live in border cities. There's so much stuff happening, and I think it would be there's two different parts to like my political engagement. There's my desire to have better elected officials that are dedicated to science, and I don't think I've ever voted for a political candidate that has not supported science in some way, whether it's technology, intellectual property protections for different for US companies, as Donald Trump was fiercely aggressive about with respect to, and I think this is very bipartisan considering the TikTok ban just passed in the House, of this thing about like protecting American interests and foreign, because tech companies that work in China, they have to basically surrender like a lot of really sensitive information about how they work, like sometimes even like the proprietary information of like how their algorithms work and stuff like that, to the government, because the government of China is the one that decides whether or not they companies can exist in China. So a lot of times that involves basically giving away intellectual property from like tech companies. So that's a huge concern. And then the other concern about the TikTok ban is this idea that there's all these vast troves of data being collected about people, and that can be used by a government. Like if the government oversees this company, they can request reports on like what are people in the US like watching, and like what are they reacting to, and then they can use that as part of their national strategy, whatever that is. So the stakes are pretty high going into this election, and in some ways I wish they weren't so high, so I wouldn't have to make this difficult decision of, do I put aside my personal interests and my personal perspectives to just like, because it's like my options are, do I not vote because I just don't support any of these candidates and I don't like the discourse that's happening. I think it's very toxic. It's heavily masculine. It's just, and I don't know how unfair it is to put presidents on such a high standard. Like, don't be old, don't ramble incoherently, like always be on your best behavior, don't misspeak. I think that's not really a workable standard for most people, especially amidst all the different crises we're having. But I also think that especially, I'm kind of tired of the heavily male narrative of government, and I don't know, I'm just tired of it. I don't know if it would be better if we had more females in government or women in government like me. Like if I was a politician, do I think I could make the world a better place? I think I could, but I wonder because look at what everyone says about the first woman vice president of the US. She's abrasive. Her communications staff keeps getting fired or leaving. She goes on camera and says stuff, and people are just like, why did you say that? It's just a whole mess in my mind. But I think that the solution for me isn't to just distance myself from it, but it's to actively be engaged in it. And I think that's different for everyone, because you can't just, not voting is a choice. You can't just not vote. You can just not vote, but then in doing so, you have chosen to not make your voice heard. And I don't think that really works, because you either make your voice heard or you don't participate in voting. And I really don't think not voting is a choice, and I find it incredibly hard to engage with our political systems right now. And I say that as someone that has worked in Congress and has worked in political campaigns her whole life, but I'm putting that aside this year to help elect Joe Biden, even though I don't really support Joe Biden's policies and I don't support the policies of the mainstream policies of my party, and I don't know if I support the policies of the other party. I just feel like there's a middle ground that no one engages in because it's bad optics. And I think that's the really hard part, is this like optics aspect where it's like, it's bad optics to talk about how much you love Donald Trump if you're a Democrat. It's bad optics to like Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's bad optics I don't have really any opinion on her except that it's really hard to be a woman in Congress. So a lot of the stuff that gets said about her is just insanely sexist. Like, I don't even know how she is really surviving that. But as you could say that about, the members of the squad, like they're also getting their AOC. So it's just a whole mess. But I really feel that the key here for scientists isn't to just like completely drop out. It's to take an active role in the political process. Put aside your personal interests and views in pursuit of like a greater good. Like, where do I see the future in like 4 years? Well, I would love to see another 4 years of someone being president who founded the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, because that's good for science in a way. Would I like to see? I mean, I could live with Donald Trump in office also. Like I already voted for him once, as I talked about in my one video. So, but I think the question, it comes down to, where did all this polarization come from? And what are we going to do to solve it? And I think solving it requires a little bit of like selflessness and engaging with the political process that may be completely out of touch to you, because the political process is a product of us. If we participate in it, we make it ours. And so I think that's really powerful. And I think that the absolute wrong thing for scientists to do right now is to just completely drop out of politics. I think we should be more engaged than ever, just thinking about all the different challenges that our world has to face. And even if we don't elect the president that like we really want ourselves as scientists, like I would love a scientist president. Like I would throw my whole life behind campaigning for a pro-science president. Like that would be my dream life. But I don't think that's really possible for a number of reasons. Scientists aren't trained to work in the political system. Scientists, they don't grow up with the type of background that enables you to, I mean, some of them might work in politics, like grow up as what am I trying to say here? Like the son of like a famous diplomat or something. And then I don't think a lot of scientists have that privilege anyway. But even if they did, they don't have the right social circles to kind of be socialized in that way. So there's like a lot of reasons. Maybe we could see a science president at some point, but yeah. So, and there's a lot of different issues happening Sometimes we put aside our views on one issue just to get another issue. Like it's all about compromise. So let's say I don't like the president's view on something, but I really, really like their view on something else, and I really want to see that happen. Then I support that candidate, that presidential candidate, because I find them, because I weigh the costs and benefits. Like I really want this to get accomplished, like as a legislative accomplishment, as a presidential accomplishment. Like I have to have this. Like let's say, I don't know. There's a number of issues. I'm not going to name them because they're also contentious and we all have different opinions on all of them. And I've been surprised by the opinions of my fellow peeps out there. So, but yeah, but I think that instead of leaning out of the system, we have to lean into the system, whatever that means to us, to make that system ours and truly participatory. We have to be able to engage with our political system as much as we might hate it. Like maybe it's not progressive enough, or maybe it's not center enough. For me, it's not center enough. For others, it's not progressive enough. And like both me and those other people should participate, because without our voices, it just becomes who tweets the most who tweets at the president every day, who campaigns for the president is gonna it's decided by us at the end of the day, the people that live in the US. And if we don't participate, whoever gets their voices made heard the loudest is gonna be winning. And that's not really fair, because it should be about the people. So that was my ramble. I hope you enjoyed my ramble. There's so many different issues. Fancy Commas worked on many different legislative issues. I used to work in Congress as a legislative intern, so my viewpoints have gotten more and more nuanced as the time has gone on, and there's so many things to be done in our world, and it's like, if we drop out of our government political engagement, all we do is like, I don't know. I just would hate to see that happen. And I think that scientists have a place at the table. Scientists are often doing science day after day, and then they'll see a decision come down from like Congress or like the Supreme Court or something, and they'll be like, oh, I'm so shocked about this. I can't believe this. I'm so angry. Well, if you took the time to work, be part of the political system, call your member of Congress. Like, no scientist, even the brightest, especially the brightest scientists, like often get called to testify in Congress. So anyone can contribute. It's not like they're going to say, oh, you're a scientist. Like, we don't listen. Congress values people's expertise very highly. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future videos. And we'll hope to catch you again sometime soon on the Fancy Comma YouTube channel. Stay engaged, my friends.